I still remember the first time I felt the temptation to scale up, really scale up. The kind of temptation that whispers in your ear after a few clean wins and makes you believe you've finally cracked the code of the market. I was young then, far too young to appreciate the difference between skill and a lucky streak, and I carried that dangerous mix of confidence and ignorance that makes traders size up long before they're ready. Back in those days, I thought increasing position size was something you earned by making money. But over the decades, through the dot-com madness, through the iron winter of 2008, through the violent whiplash of the COVID era, I learned the truth. You don't scale up because you made money. You scale up because your process is proven, stable, repeatable under pressure. And that lesson wasn't written in any book. It was carved into me through years of scars, both financial and emotional. The kind you only get by surviving long enough to look back and say, I didn't know anything back then. Scaling up, you see, is not the moment you get stronger. It's the moment the market tests how strong you really are. And most traders fail that test because they scale for the wrong reasons: ego, greed, impatience, or that subtle intoxication that comes from feeling on a roll. But momentum in your psychology is not the same as edge in your strategy, and the market has a cruel way of reminding you of that distinction. The first real time I attempted to scale with intention, not emotion, was after the dot-com collapse, when I had already lost enough money and pride to make any rational man quit. I was rebuilding, slowly, painfully, and more humbly than I ever had before. For nearly a year, I kept my position size fixed, small, almost embarrassingly small. I traded like a man walking through a minefield, testing each step with the care of someone who had already lost too much to be reckless. And in that slow, disciplined grind, I began to see something I had never seen before: consistency. Not perfection, not brilliance, just a steady rhythm of decisions that made sense whether they won or lost. And consistency is the soil from which scaling up must grow. Most people don't understand that. They think scaling is about aggression, about going bigger, about accelerating your growth curve. But scaling is actually about endurance. It's about proving over and over that your decision-making holds its shape under stress. If your emotions shatter under small size, they will explode under big size. And so the real art lies not in sizing up quickly, but in waiting long enough for your emotional foundation to harden. After months of consistency, I began noticing that my trades weren't just working. They were working for the right reasons. My setups behaved the way I expected. My losses were controlled, manageable, boring even. And that's the moment every trader hates but must face. When your trading becomes boring, that is when you are ready to scale. It was during those days that I developed my first scaling rule, a rule I still follow 3 decades later. You only increase size after a long period of disciplined execution, not after a period of profit. Because profit can come from luck, but discipline never does. So I scaled a little, just a step, not a leap. And immediately, I felt something shift inside me. The same setups, the same charts, the same entries suddenly carried more weight, more consequence, more emotional gravity. And it surprised me how much that extra weight shook me. That's when I learned the real secret most people never talk about. Scaling up isn't a financial adjustment, it's a psychological transformation. Your brain reacts differently to risk when the numbers get bigger. Your pulse changes, your breath shortens, your expectations warp. The exact same decision that felt calm at one size feels dangerous at another. And if you think you can skip that emotional recalibration, you're already halfway to blowing up. I remember a particular trade around that time, a classic breakout pattern, clean volume expansion, textbook setup. At my usual size, it would have been routine. But with the increased size, my hand shook slightly on the mouse. That's how ridiculous the mind can be. Same trade, different size, completely different psychology. And that trade taught me another truth that stuck with me forever. You don't scale up once. You scale up in layers. Each layer revealing a new weakness in your mental wiring. And weakness must be faced, not ignored. Over the years, as I gained experience and lived through more market storms than I care to count, I developed a kind of internal checklist that tells me when scaling is appropriate. It never begins with profit. It begins with emotional stability. Are you following your plan even after losses? Are you trading less when the market is choppy? Are your wins and losses alike boring, predictable, structured? Are you passing on mediocre setups even when you feel restless? When the answer to those questions becomes a calm, honest yes, then and only then do you earn the right to increase size. And even then, the increase must be small. Scaling is not a staircase, it's a ramp, barely tilted, so gradual you almost don't feel the incline. During the 2008 crisis, when volatility was high and fear thicker than smoke, I noticed something interesting. The traders who scaled up too fast were the first to die. They saw volatility as opportunity. I saw it as a magnifier of skill, yes, but also of flaws. The market was wild then, swinging like a wounded animal, and big size turned every mistake into a mortal wound. But I survived that era not by being aggressive, but by being precise. By only scaling when my emotional state was steady and my setups were working across conditions, not just in favorable winds. And when the recovery came, when the charts finally showed strength supported by fundamentals, I scaled intentionally, slowly, carefully. That was when I realized a profound truth. Scaling is not about chasing bigger wins. It's about honoring the responsibility that comes with bigger risk. And responsibility is something you must grow into. Through the COVID crash years later, I watched the same pattern repeat with a new generation of traders. Stimulus checks poured into the market, everything went vertical, and kids who had never seen a bear market were suddenly trading with confidence, built on euphoria, not experience. They sized up aggressively, believing the rising tide would protect them. But tides turn. They always do. And when they turned in 2021, the same story unfolded. Those who scaled too fast vanished from the arena. Those who scaled slow, steady, methodical, the ones who treated risk like a living thing survived. And survival, in the end, is what gives you the longevity needed to become truly skilled. Scaling is not a celebration. It is a test, one that reveals whether your foundation is real or illusion. And most traders don't fail because they lack strategy. They fail because they scale before their identity as a trader is fully formed. They scale into a version of themselves that hasn't learned to carry that weight yet. But when you scale at the right time, when discipline is consistent, emotions are steady, setups are repeatable, and your psychology is trained for the weight of larger numbers, something remarkable happens. You begin to trade with a quiet confidence, a grounded presence that doesn't waver with every tick. You stop feeling the need to prove anything to the market because you've learned the truth the hard way. Big size doesn't make you a better trader. It simply amplifies who you already are. And that is why the real question is never when will you scale, but what kind of trader will you be when you finally do? Because the moment you choose to increase size is the moment every crack in your discipline becomes a fracture. Every emotional misstep becomes a threat. Every unresolved weakness becomes a live wire. And scaling wisely is the only thing that keeps those wires from sparking when the market throws its inevitable volatility at you, creating a moment where you either step into maturity or fall into the same trap that has swallowed countless eager traders who believed they could rush the process. And that is exactly why scaling up must always begin with the kind of honesty most traders spend their whole careers avoiding. Because scaling isn't about aggression or ambition, it's about alignment. The alignment between your strategy, your emotions, and your ability to execute under pressure without breaking. And the first step in that alignment is admitting exactly where you are on the spectrum between discipline and delusion. Every trader carries some measure of both, but only the ones who scale wisely know which part of themselves is in the driver's seat. I learned this the hard way during a period years after the COVID chaos, when the market had settled into one of those deceptively calm stretches that lull even seasoned traders into a false sense of safety. I was trading well steady, consistent, confident in my setups, and on paper, I had earned the right to increase size again. But something in me felt off, a subtle tension in my chest during losing days, a whisper of impatience I thought I'd outgrown. That whisper alone was enough to stop me from scaling, because if you feel the urge to rush, that is your signal that you are not ready. Scaling from a place of restlessness is like pouring gasoline on a candle. It might give you a brighter flame for a moment, but the next gust of wind will burn the whole thing down. So I waited, and in the weeks that followed, I watched traders around me begin to size up aggressively. Their equity curves were rising, and they mistook that rise as evidence that they were evolving. But equity growth without psychological growth is just leverage wearing a disguise. And sure enough, when volatility returned, and it always returns, they were swept off the table like dust in a storm. I stayed small through that turbulence, and when the storm passed, I saw something clearly. Patience had protected me more than any strategy ever could. That's when I realized the second great truth of scaling. It must always be done in phases that are so small they feel almost insignificant. If the increase feels bold, it's too big. If it makes your heart race, it's too big. If you find yourself checking the profit and loss more often, it's too big. Scaling should feel boring. It should feel like a natural extension of the same calm process you've already mastered. Because the goal of scaling isn't to make more money, it's to grow into the trader who can handle the responsibility that comes with more money. That responsibility is something too many traders underestimate. When you hold larger size, your losses don't just hurt your account, they challenge your identity. They make you question your skill, your worth, your path. If you haven't built a strong enough internal foundation, those questions will break you. But if your foundation is solid, if you've learned to detach your self-worth from your outcomes, then larger size becomes simply another variable, not an emotional earthquake. I remember a moment in 2014 when this truth hit me harder than any market move. I had been scaling gradually for months, disciplined and methodical, and everything was working beautifully. Then I took a loss, a normal loss, nothing dramatic, a clean stop out. But the size made it sting. That sting triggered a familiar old instinct, the urge to make it back quickly. A dangerous instinct. A young trader might have ignored it, but age and experience had taught me to listen closely to the voice beneath the voice, the subtle emotional tremor that reveals whether you're stable or slipping. So I reduced size immediately, not because I was afraid of the next trade, but because I respected the weight of that emotional shift. Scaling requires humility. You don't just increase size when things are good. You decrease size when things inside you don't feel right. That simple act has saved me from countless disasters. And that's the third truth about scaling. It is a dynamic process, not a straight line upward. You scale up when the market conditions align with your strategy, when your execution is consistent, when your emotions are steady. You scale down when volatility spikes, when your edge weakens, when your psychology wavers. Scaling is like adjusting the sails on a ship. You don't just set them once, you tune them constantly, reading the winds, respecting the tides, understanding that the goal is not speed but survival and direction. Too many traders treat scaling like a rite of passage, something you do once and never revisit. They forget that markets evolve and emotional landscapes shift, and what felt easy last month may feel heavy today. Scaling is a living discipline. And the traders who thrive across decades aren't the ones who scale aggressively, they're the ones who scale intelligently. But here's the part that only veteran traders ever talk about behind closed doors. The moment you scale up properly, intentionally, patiently, something inside you changes. You start making decisions with a deeper seriousness, a grounded presence. Your entries become cleaner, your exits become calmer, your risk management stops being optional and becomes instinct. You stop needing excitement from the market because you understand that excitement and longevity don't live in the same room. And as your size grows slowly, your identity as a trader grows with it. You become someone who isn't shaken by a losing streak, someone who understands that a drawdown is feedback, not failure. You become someone who respects risk the way a seasoned sailor respects the sea, not with fear, but with reverence. And eventually, after years of careful calibration, there comes a moment, quiet, uncelebrated, but profound, when you realize you've become the kind of trader who can handle size not because you want it, but because you've earned it through discipline, patience, and humility. And that's the moment scaling stops being a goal and starts being a natural extension of who you are. So, if you're standing on the edge of this decision, wondering when to increase your size, here is the truth whispered from 3 decades in the arena. Scale when your process is stable, when your emotions are quiet, when your discipline is boringly consistent. Scale slowly, like someone who knows the cost of rushing. Scale with respect, because size is weight, and weight will always reveal whether your structure is built on stone or sand. And when you finally take that step, when you increase size with a calm certainty that you are ready, not because of profit, but because of process, you will feel something shift inside you, something steady and powerful. The feeling of stepping into a larger version of yourself, forged not by luck, but by the long, patient work of becoming the kind of trader who can carry the weight of larger risk without losing who you are. And if this resonates with you, if some part of your journey echoes these lessons, share your thoughts below. Tell me where you are in your scaling journey. And if you want more insights shaped by decades in the trenches, follow the channel and leave a comment so we can keep walking this long road of mastery together.